Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective. This is Think Design Stories. In this series, we will be going behind the scenes on one of the most iconic laptop brands ever conceived and is still going strong. For today's episode, I'm joined by Rob Herman. Rob joined IBM, specifically the ThinkPad team, in 1999 as a segment manager for the ThinkPad I series, and this led to the ThinkPad portfolio team lead from 2004 to 2006. And from there, he has held various roles in the last 11 years in leadership, specifically in Lenovo's Workstation business, which includes the ThinkPad P series. He was involved with the A20P, the R series, the X41 tablet, the Z series, as well as the introduction, of course, of the P series. His unique perspective will certainly be valuable as we continue to explore the innovations that came from ThinkPad. So if it's okay with you, Rob, I was hoping for just a quick introduction about where your life has kind of led you, and then we'll dive into those questions that I sent you earlier.
Yeah, sure, Thomas. First of all, happy to be talking to you, and really appreciate the time. My degree was in economics, and I joined the PC business right out of college in the finance, and I worked my way into cost accounting, product cost accounting. So I was, I guess you could have called me like a product cost engineer, but I didn't have engineer, background. But I quickly became kind of a semi-engineer. I learned a lot about, the components on the system, and back then, I mean, it was an ESA bus that we were talking about way back then, and really sat down with a lot of the developers and design engineers back then to learn about what was driving the cost of our systems. And one day the facility I worked in was purely an R&D and manufacturing facility. So it was a factory and an engineering lab. And one day these guys showed up with suits and ties on, which wasn't really, a common thing to wear where we worked. And they were, barking orders at people and just looked like they were in charge. And I said, I went to one of my colleagues, I said, who are those guys? Oh, those are the product managers. And I was like, that's what I want to be. So I went and got my MBA, and then went into competitive analysis and was studying the competition's products and pricing and that kind of thing. And so that was kind of a natural bridge from finance. And then from there went into product management, and I was hooked, and worked my way up through product management. I was actually the first Windows product manager for NCR. And then from there went into actual hardware product management for desktop PCs at Compaq. I spent 3 years at Compaq in Houston, and learned a ton. Those 3 years were more like 7 in terms of the amount that I learned in business. And then from there, I had an opportunity. A friend of mine worked at IBM, and had an opportunity to interview for a job on ThinkPad, and joined the ThinkPad team working on the ThinkPad I series, which was the retail consumer product. So that really kind of shaped my career within ThinkPad, where I was really focused on more cost-oriented, value-oriented products, and that was really counter to what ThinkPad was doing at the time. I remember the marketing manager putting a presentation together saying, basically saying, here's why ThinkPad can never be below $1,000. So there was a lot of pressure to maintain the brand, and at Compaq, I really learned how to manage a product, but in ThinkPad, I really learned how to manage a product within a brand, which is a very different world, right? I mean, you have to really understand the criteria of the products, what makes the attributes that make the product what it is, and be true to those, and assign value to those attributes, and give yourself credit for those attributes, and then design around them, and build the most competitive product you can, while being true to those attributes. So, things like the track point obviously are very familiar, and common to every ThinkPad. And by the way, I fell in love with the track point. I'd never used one before I joined IBM, and within 3 days of using it, I didn't want to use anything else. I got rid of a mouse. I still don't use a mouse, and I don't use the touchpad. I've been using a track point for over 20 years now, and just love it. So you really become very enamored almost with these features and attributes, and you become a big advocate for them, and you work on selling them, basically selling the value of these attributes. So it was a very exciting time within ThinkPad. I managed numerous products there, and then ultimately managed the actual whole product management team for ThinkPad for a while, and then moved out into the geography and worked in North America geography for a while, and then came back to work on Workstations, where I'm now the general manager of the Workstation business unit within Lenovo.
It's interesting that you kind of started with the I series, because that would have been one of the first times where they are shooting for kind of that, consumer everyman market. And yeah. I believe that the production of that was actually handled by Acer, I think.
That's correct. That is correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was a natural fit for that job because I worked a lot with the Taiwanese ODM community. I was very familiar with Acer and Mytek and Quanta. So from a development side, and a technology side, that was very familiar territory for me. And then, in Compaq, I was working in the Presario group, which was consumer. So that was also a natural fit from a go-to-market standpoint. Unfortunately, it was a very difficult journey for ThinkPad in retail. Retail became very competitive, and ThinkPad was largely a commercial business brand, and so it was hard to break out of that. So we ended up sunsetting iSeries, but that then became that spawned into new products for us, right? So that's where I basically fostered in the R series, which became our SMB ThinkPad, and so that was somewhat close to consumer, but still a business oriented product.
The I series still was a pretty influential product, even if it didn't stand the test of time, if you will, because I also think that was the first machine to feature the ThinkLight that would go on to many, many other series. So, and I think that's one of the neat things about the brand, is that you can have a product line that ends, but there's an idea that makes the jump, that is like, you know what, this is worth carrying on. And I'm probably going to say that quite a few times tonight, especially with the machines that you were involved with. Speaking of which, the first kind of workstation machine that ThinkPad would put out, I believe, was the A20P, and you were involved with that. What was that like? What did that do?
Yeah, that was a very interesting time. It was our first effort to bring out a discrete graphics workstation focused product, and work with the independent software vendors, the ISVs, to certify our platform for their applications, and really target the product specifically at workstation users like CAD engineers, mechanical engineers, product designers, architects, as well as science and research and oil and gas. So you may know that IBM had the IntelliStation brand for desktop workstations. And what we found, over time was that customers were asking for mobile versions of those workstations as well, because they had users that were on the road. So IntelliStation didn't really have a platform by which to create notebooks. So we took on that mission within ThinkPad and created the A20P, which was a 3-spindle notebook. It's been a long time since I've said that. Floppy drive, hard drive, and optical drive, and large format screen. Very, very, kind of a beefy system. It was a big system, but customers loved it. They loved the attributes of the ThinkPad, as I was bringing up before, and just the historical reliability of ThinkPad and the dependability of the product really matched up well with what customers look for there. And because of the size of the product, we were able to have enough thermal headroom to deliver on the performance that those customers were expecting. And that legacy lives on in ThinkPad. We still have a line of workstation products within the ThinkPad brand, which I manage today, known as ThinkPad P series.
I think the A series too had one of the accessories for the bays that actually had the numpad that shot out.
That's right.
To this day, like if I add one to my collection, that's the one I want, because that to me is just such a great use. If you don't need one of those 2 bays all the time, I could imagine that would have been a really popular for anyone entering data or doing accounting. It's just like,
that's right.
I don't have to plug it in or dig it out of my bag. I just hit the button and out it shoots.
Boy, you're reminding me of, that I forget more than I probably know, at this point. That was quite an innovation. And now I recall that, we had numerous discussions about that. We knew customers wanted a numpad. They were clear about that feedback. But how to implement it, right? Mm-hmm. Was it going to be a cabled USB kind of device, some kind of cable device, or was it going to be something we integrated? And we had the modular optical drive, so we made the decision. Okay, we'll use that bay, that second bay, to have a pop out numpad, and that was a pretty incredible innovation.
Yeah, no, that was so cool. I've only ever seen pictures, but it's on the bucket list. So the A series obviously did quite well, because we've got the workstation lineup that we'll be speaking about later. But another notch in the belt, if you will, of ThinkPad, of course, is the R series. Mm-hmm. And it almost sounds to me that the R series was almost in many ways the spiritual successor to that mid-range notebook that started with the I series.
Yes. Yeah, if you go back to that time, laptops, it was rare to see a laptop, especially from a tier 1 OEM that was under $1,000, right? Mm-hmm. But it was clear from a market trend standpoint that the pricing was headed that way. I mean, everything back then was really led by consumer. Whatever you saw happen in consumer, you were bound to see some form of that in the commercial products, especially as you looked at, SMB oriented products. So there was a great deal of pressure and desire from an organizational standpoint to participate in these growing price points. And So we really had to come up with a new product, right? We knew we couldn't leverage, an X series or a T series to do that. I mean, they had certain attributes that, uh, you know, really required a certain cost point to reach and deliver those attributes. So we had to make some trade-offs in terms of materials. I don't want to say we were aiming for cheap, but we were trying to aim for the best value and to deliver as many features as we could within within the brand attributes and reach that target price point of sub 1,000. So that was really the genesis for the R series. It was a natural evolution from I series to R series. I mean, I series actually went from a consumer oriented brand to an SMB oriented brand as the floppy drive went away. It was actually our first 14-inch two spindle system, the ThinkPad I series. It was about the third generation or fourth generation. And then that just transformed into the R series because we decided we needed a new letter to really represent the value it was delivering for SMBs. So really, I mean, when you think about ThinkPad, you think about innovation and constant innovation. And the innovation with R series, though, was how do we deliver these great ThinkPad attributes in a sub $1,000 notebook? And that was really the innovation that we pulled off. And it really laid the groundwork for some of the some of the efficiencies that we have created in some of the other products, namely T series. Because you look over time, the T series really started participating in broader price points and broader cost points, and it was just based on some of the engineering knowledge that we gained by doing R series and taking best practices from really everywhere to create the best products in every class.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that was happening throughout the brand. I remember reading in Mr. Naito's book when he was discussing the genesis of the X1 was primarily its goal was to make a affordable X300. And that's essentially what they came up with. It was still expensive, but the innovation led to a product that was ultimately better. So yeah, absolutely. Cost measuring is not always a negative outcome, because if you find a more innovative way to do essentially the same thing,
yes,
everybody wins.
That's right. That's right.
So, no, that is really, really cool. And I guess speaking about cool, the X41.
Mm-hmm.
What a fantastic and unique design. I've had the opportunity to handle, I think, the X61T and then the X220T and the X230T. And that iconic, like, flip and fold design has been copied many times by many other manufacturers, but they can never get it quite right. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was an exciting time for our brand. I mean, you brought up the X1 and the X1 Carbon. I mean, those were definitely groundbreaking and exciting products. But even back in that time frame, that was 2004, 2005. We were testing lots of different things. I can remember, Thomas. This is far afield from that X41 tablet, but in the same time frame, we had created a very large desktop replacement system, the G series, which was based on basically desktop CPUs, right? So we were putting a desktop CPU into a mobile form factor. So there were lots of different things going on then. And at the time, I was managing the ThinkPad product management team. So I had the whole portfolio. And, there were so many products going on. The Z series was another one, which I know we'll talk about. And the X41, I mean, I thought it was a great product. I had a very capable product manager who worked on that product. I had a lot of confidence in him. And honestly, I didn't really pay a lot of attention as that product was coming to market and it was, the finalizing development on it. And one day, the product manager, Jeff, he came into my office. He said, Rob, here is the X41 tablet. Check out, the twist and flip, feature of this. Check out the garaged pen, just all of these different features. And I said, hey, Jeff, I'd like a SVT unit, which is basically our beta, before we get to final production. And so he gave me one and I was hooked. I could not believe how capable that product was. I mean, we designed it as a notebook first and a tablet second, but a very capable tablet. And then, just the innovations that were happening with, pen enablement, like the Wacom digitizer, the Windows for tablet capabilities that were out there, and just the ease of being able to write. I mean, I used to write a lot, so and I'd gotten away from that over the years, just using a standard form factor product, and I just fell in love with the ability to take notes digitally and just use natural handwriting. So it was quite an amazing product. And you think about, the innovations that we had there, they've really, you can really see a number of them in the products that we have today. So it was just a very exciting time and lots of great products going on there. But the X41 tablet, it caught me by surprise and I fell in love with it for a number of years and used it. So.
Yeah, it really paved the way for pretty much the entire tablet lineup that
Yes.
Lenovo had, because after that you had, of course, machines like the Yoga, which still had that garaged pen. It was still very much a ThinkPad that respected, it's got to be a good notebook by its own right, which I think is a step that a lot of manufacturers miss. Because you're not always going to use it as a tablet. And in fact, I would say that there's probably quite a few people that use it more as a traditional notebook than they do the tablet part, but they still like the idea of having that tablet availability.
Yes.
And I think that that's remained very, very true, even with, kind of modern equivalents like the X1 Fold, which, that thing is just a race car in the tablet world. Like nothing can touch it. No one's even trying right now, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So
what's interesting though, Thomas, is I still see the younger generation using pen and paper when they want to write things down.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought this was going to create a revolution where, pen and paper would just go away. But I think people are still enamored with, or maybe not enamored, but just out of habit, used to using pen and paper. So.
I think that's part of it. Like the hardware has definitely gotten a lot better, because when tablet computing first, kind of came out, one of the things you always struggled with is the battery draw on a screen like that, because it's not only running the screen, it's got to run it bright enough, because if you're writing, you're probably dealing with a lot more overhead light, or if you're outdoors, then you really need those nits. So that takes a huge tank on the battery life, and batteries are heavy. So you have to balance out that customer experience component of it. But I think what the biggest challenge right now is actually the software end of things. I think hardware is like pretty much spot on, but having a good software suite that is intuitive and easy to learn with a low learning curve that you can still do a lot with, I think we're getting there with some things like Microsoft OneNote, but I think more companies could invest more R&D into the software end of things to really make it take off.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an area that's ripe for a lot more innovation and improvement. And I think we could reap a lot of benefits out of it. The whole IO, just kind of the input area is, uh, yeah, it's really ripe for innovation.
Yeah. Well, there's always next year. That's great. So we mentioned it earlier, but the Z series or Z series, if you're where I'm from, I've actually got mine just sitting over here. And unfortunately, when I got this one, eBay wasn't too terribly careful with it, but it still works and still turns on. Although the titanium lid took one for the team, as you can see.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, it must have gotten
yeah.
dropped when eBay was messing around with their shipping program. Uh, but I'd love to hear your stories on this because this thing, if you look at Lenovo's product lineup today, is almost like looking into the future because now we
Yeah.
have the X1 Yoga Titanium and 6x10 screens are making this massive comeback.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was another interesting time because it really was an inflection point in the industry. Widescreen TVs had pretty much taken over in the living room and in the home. Uh, Widescreens were really coming on fast in the consumer notebook market as well as in the display market. But it hadn't quite touched the commercial space yet. And commercial enterprise customers were really wed to the idea of having a standard aspect ratio screen. And so, at the time, again, I was managing the ThinkPad portfolio, and I was basically leading the strategy for the portfolio itself. And so, as a product manager, you have to balance, as you were mentioning, you've mentioned a couple of times tonight. You have to balance, what innovations and what technologies are emerging and what customers want. Um, so we had we had portfolios of all different, touching all sorts of different scenarios. We had a portfolio plan that was 100% widescreen, so every product was going to go widescreen. We had a portfolio plan where half the products would go widescreen, the other half would not. Um, Ultimately, even though really everything in the industry was telling us that widescreen was the path, we had conducted many, many customer advisory councils. So, a couple of times a year, we bring in customers and take them through our plans on a confidential basis, and ask them for feedback, ask them for input. And the overwhelming feedback was, we don't want to move to widescreen. We want to stay on standard aspect ratio. So the decision was that we would choose one product and we'd create a new series, and we would have a 14-inch and 15-inch offering of a widescreen ThinkPad, and that's the genesis of Z series. And what Z series allowed us to do, as you just showed with your titanium cover there, is it gave us a little bit of freedom because of the wide screen to experiment with the form factor, with the shape of the product in a way. You see that there's more rounded corners than you would typically see on a ThinkPad. And then materials, with the titanium. I mean, that was a huge departure from the standard black. Prior to that, really our journey into materials was more about paint, peach skin paint, and we had dabbled with the idea of leather as a cover before as well, but going into the titanium was really a groundbreaking move, for the brand. And it was interesting. 6 weeks prior to mass production, we found that we were having yield issues with that titanium cover, and the yields were very low. I won't even tell you how low they were, to the point where I was going to our senior leadership and saying, I don't know that we should do this. And our senior leader at the time, was Peter Hortensius. He was head of engineering at the time, and he said, Rob, we will work this out. Don't worry about it. And we had a whole marketing campaign behind the titanium. And so there was a little bit of time there, about 6 weeks to 3 weeks in, that it was really touch and go, but they figured it out. They figured out how to extrude the titanium in a way that had a better yield, and we got into production fine and started cranking out the titanium covers. And it was a really groundbreaking product for us. I think it helped put a new stamp, a new face on ThinkPad, and give reviewers and our customers, a different a different offering to consider. And ultimately, as you said, it really did inform us in terms of the future of ThinkPad, because within 2 years we had pretty much converted the whole product line to widescreen, and everybody at that time, customers were all bought in. I mean, they were like, yeah, everybody's going widescreen. Let's just do it. So it was a good way to get in, and a good way to differentiate ourselves and show a different side of ThinkPad and innovate in different ways, including materials. So it was exciting.
No, I bet it was. And I really like your point about some of these series being created to kind of give you that wiggle room, as you say, to kind of innovate in a direction that you wouldn't normally, because it sounds like there was a lot of lessons learned about, okay, well, how do we work with titanium? Mm-hmm. and how, you're going to put that in the filing cabinet away for later. Like, don't know when we're going to dust it off, but we know that that's where the titanium adventure lives, and the next time we go to use it, we'll just dust that off and carry on.
Yeah, Thomas, we have a massive catalog of past experience that we can draw from, and even as old friends like David Hill move on, and someone takes their place, that catalog is still there. And there's always David Hill's just a phone call away to consult with him as well. So there's a lot of people in our corner. We definitely haven't done this alone, and a lot of great people have contributed to our brand, including customers themselves. We've gotten a lot of good innovation ideas out of our customers themselves.
Yeah. I remember talking to David, I think this was last year. We were talking about keyboards, and he said that, Lenovo knows everything about how not to make a keyboard because they've done all of these iterations. And I think, is it next year that it's the 30th anniversary of ThinkPad? Like, that's a long time for a brand to be innovating and creating and tinkering and toying. And it pays off, right?
Yep.
It might not look like it when you see an advert and you're like, yeah, but it took them 30 years to get to creating that. So they know everything about the keycap being scooped out just so. The little sticky feet on the bottom are designed in a specific way to dampen drops on the floor. Like, there's like that stuff you don't get from manufacturing a laptop for 5 years, no. 10 years.
No, you're right. And that goes back to what I said earlier in terms of, as a product manager, having that experience of managing products, and then having that experience of managing a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a durability aspect of it and an evolutionary aspect of it that makes your products timeless, but also makes them uh, endure, I guess is the word I'm thinking of. So and yet innovate at the same, show innovation at the same time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Not to name any names, but large corporate brands that love to manufacture their computers out of, mostly aluminum, that tend to be popular. They don't necessarily innovate too much, and when they do, it's an idea that was on, the X1 carbon second generation. You can probably see where I'm going with that. Yeah, and it's like it's lukewarm,
yeah.
and it's not exciting, you know. But speaking of exciting, these P series workstations. Now, I have to admit that I have not actually had the opportunity to feature any of the workstation ThinkPads on this channel,
Mhm.
mainly because they don't show up very often. Mainly because I think they're held on for a really, really long time by the people that end up purchasing them, and then when they are sold used, they're just like they just get picked up right away. So I
Yeah.
do have to admit, out of all of the series, this is actually probably the one that I
Mhm.
know the least about.
Yeah.
That would include the W series. One day, I'm sure I'll get my hands on one. And then, of course, the P series, which you're working on right now. And from what I understand, those machines are pretty amazing at what they can do.
Yeah. 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 If you'll indulge me, I'll tell you a quick story. So a number of years ago, it was 2014, 2015. We were working to create the P series portfolio. Prior to that, we talked about the A20P being the first ThinkPad workstation. Then it evolved into W series, right? So ThinkPad W series was our workstation series of ThinkPads, and we created ThinkPad P series because we already had ThinkStation, our desktop brand of workstations, as P series. And we wanted to unify, we wanted to keep the ThinkPad brand name, obviously, but unify under one letter to signify performance and power for the workstation brand. So we created the P series umbrella. And prior to announcement, I had an opportunity to present to the senior leadership team of Lenovo, and these were senior leadership meetings that happened pretty often during the year, and it was special to present to the senior leaders. And it was a typical conference room where you had the U-shaped conference room, and you had all these executives in the U, and you would stand in the middle as a presenter and show off your products. And prior to my time up there, just before me, my peer who managed the rest of the ThinkPad portfolios, so he had X1, he had T series, and all these great, thin and light products. He had spent about 45 minutes in front of them, and during his 45 minutes, he's whipping out, all these thin and light X series and passing them around, and they're going around the U, and the executives are holding them up and feeling the weight. And when we were launching P series, we were also launching the rebirth of a 17-inch form factor workstation. So that was going to be my feature product. So as I'm watching my peer whip out these thin and lights, I'm like, well, and right then and there, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to pass this around. I'm gonna stand up there and hold it and talk to them. And so I got up there and I said, I started talking about the P series and what it meant and, how important it was for our business. And I said, and our flagship product is the 17-inch, P70, ThinkPad P70. And I opened it up and I looked right at the executive that was sitting at the head of the U, and I said, but you know what? I am not going to pass this around. And everybody just looked at me like, what? You're not going to pass this around? And I said, yeah, I'm not going to pass this around because this is not for you. This product is not for you. This product is for the engineers at Audi. This product is for the architects at Foster and Partners, or oil and gas engineers at Exxon, because they are looking for the power and performance, the maximum power and performance that they can get out of CPU, memory, graphics, hard drive, that can't be delivered in an X series product. It's just not physically possible. And the trade-off is you're going to have a larger form factor system. It's going to be 7 pounds. It's going to be, 27 millimeters thick, and it's going to be, very large. So I definitely made my point, because I could see everybody's face going, okay, that makes sense. And that's the fun of the workstation business. Is it's a very targeted market. We know who our customers are, and we know exactly what they're going to do with these products, right? They're either going to be doing CAD design or some kind of 3D animation. I mean, game developers are another one. 3D animated movies is another area that where workstations are used. So it's very exciting to work with these customers who are basically using our products to design their company's next generation revenue streams, right? So you think about an automotive company, they're working on products 5 years from now, right? And they're using workstations to do that today. And I have responsibility for that whole business. So it's both the desktop ThinkStation product lines as well as the ThinkPad. And I cherish these products. I mean, even though they are big, again, they're just not they're not all big, but they're just not something that everybody's going to carry around, and it's really for a special user in the business.
That actually kind of made me pause for a moment, because I kind of realized that making a product for like the exact customer in mind is an incredibly rare thing.
Yeah.
Like if you stop and think about it, because, and this is in any industry, I would imagine, it would be the equivalent of designing a fork for left-handed truck drivers, right? It's something so niche, but because it is, you can design it to be matte black so it doesn't catch the sun off of the window, and to have high sides so the food doesn't spill out. Like you're able to go into these little sorts of details that would not matter to anyone else.
Right.
Your general population that would, fit a T series or something like that, or an X if they need something smaller. But it really highlights that.
Well, and you brought up the pop out keypad, numeric keypad on the A20P. I mean, that is another example where that's not for everybody. And it's not just for accountants either, because engineers that are using simulation software or things like that, they will be using that numeric keypad, and we do feature a dedicated numeric keypad on a number of our products. On the P15 and the P17 both have numeric keypads. So it's really interesting, because growing up I was never great at math or science, but that really is the foundation of what my customers do. Just about everything they do involves math. or science. And I've really come to appreciate the value of engineers and technical people that are data scientists. They're another customer of ours. Developing AI algorithms and that kind of thing, machine learning. All of these have the foundation of math, and it's just interesting to see how these individuals are working to solve very difficult problems. And in some cases, they're problems that are not just for a product, but for the world. We're involved with a nonprofit that is focused on building healthier buildings, and they were doing this before the pandemic even. Designing, it's an architecture group that basically helps build healthy hospitals in Africa. They design it a certain way so that the airflow, it comes through in a certain way and exits out a certain way, and that the patients are situated in a certain part of the building. So it's very interesting to see how imaginative and involved they can get in using that engineering to create sustainable living. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that would be, absolutely. I felt I've learned a lot from this conversation, Rob. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity and really kind of causing me to think more about the history of ThinkPad and my involvement in that history. As I said in my note to you, I mean, we, as a product manager, you tend to lean more toward thinking about the future than the past. I mean, sure, you draw upon the past to learn your lessons and carry on things that you did well and learn to improve on things you didn't do well. But really, our eye is always is always on the future and not so much on reflecting deeply on the past. But I think about what I've been involved in ThinkPad and really how that has shaped the portfolio that we have today, and how those products have left their legacy in the products that we have today. So it's pretty unique to have a career like this and be involved in such a renowned brand and its legacy on the industry itself. So I feel pretty lucky. So thank you.
Oh, it was my absolute pleasure. I was really excited to speak to you because I knew that you'd have such a different perspective. And I don't think a lot of people realize, and you were alluding to it there just now, that you're always looking forward because you might have a product that's getting ready to launch. It's just coming out of the prototype phase. It's, the plans are going to the manufacturer to start developing parts. But at that stage, you're probably already looking at the next generation of that machine. And I think for some people, they just cannot wrap their head around how quick a development cycle can be. Because while the paint is drying, literally and metaphorically, you're already thinking, okay, that's Gen 1, here's Gen 2. What are we going to innovate? What are we going to fix? What are we going to add?
I'm just glad I'm not in the cell phone business, because I think that would be the cycles on those are just,
they're insane.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So,
and not to be too critical of your brothers and sisters at Motorola, but it's really hard to innovate a phone, like really hard. Yeah. To do it meaningfully. It's like, you can have a camera bump that's this thick, but at the end of the day, that's not really what the customer wants. I want a phone that I can fit in my pocket.
Yeah.